Well, here we are at the close of the second day of the 7th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum. And we thought we'd close with a big bang. And why not close by doing a little fireside chat with someone from the White House. And we have a special guest from the White House with us today. It's Dr. Tara Schwetz, Assistant Director for Biomedical Science Initiatives at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Dr. Schwetz, welcome to the forum and also to BioTalk.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, we appreciate your being here, and we hope to learn about things that you've been involved in at NIH, as well as some exciting new programs that are on the horizon. And the way we like to start, though, when people have not been exposed to some of the participants in our forums or BioTalks, is we like to have them do a little self-introduction. And nobody can talk about yourself better than you. So how about giving the audience a little introduction to Tara, if you don't mind my calling you Tara.
Sure.
And also how you ended up in health sciences as a career.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but no, so as you indicated, I'm Tara Schwetz. I'm Assistant Director for Biomedical Science Initiatives at OSTP. I'm actually on detail there from the National Institutes of Health, where I'm the NIH Associate Deputy Director. A little bit of background about myself. I'm actually a biophysicist by training. And, in terms of, how did I even get into this career? I was thinking about this in advance of this discussion, and the short answer is I honestly don't know. I'm a first generation college student. And so I always knew that I wanted to do something in the sort of medical space, something related to science. And, I think kind of growing up, I always thought that that would mean that I would be a medical doctor, a physician. And actually, I think we had a family friend or someone at the church that we used to go to that was an anesthesiologist. So running around as like a 7-year-old, I'd tell people that I wanted to be an anesthesiologist, which I think always threw people off a little bit. Like, I don't even know that word. But going into college, I started doing all the stuff that you do to sort of prep for medical school. And I think in my sophomore year, I started both volunteering in a hospital and also doing research in a lab. And that research in a lab was really my first exposure to and experience with, scientific research. And I really loved it. And then I was kind of stumped. I was like, well, how do you do this? Like, what's the career path that you go down to do this? And talking to the professor that I was working with, convinced me to apply to graduate school. And so I went down that path of going to graduate school, a postdoc, and then I actually had always anticipated that I would go and do research in industry. And about a year or so into my postdoc, I started thinking that I wasn't sure if that was the path that I wanted to follow. And I, myself, along with another postdoc and graduate student, we were at Vanderbilt at the time, and we established a seminar series on kind of non-traditional careers in science, so things outside of the bench, essentially. And we had a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow come and speak to us. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do as my next step. I thought it just sounded so amazing to be able to work at this intersection of science and policy, and really to be able to, have a more direct impact on science and the health of the general public as well, in working in that space than you would necessarily from being in the lab. So, I went down that route and actually came to NIH through the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, and until recently have been there ever since. So I just celebrated my 9-year anniversary in the federal government.
Well, congratulations. A lot of people don't make it that long. You've had 9 years at NIH, but you've had many different roles there. So talk a little bit about your career path once you got into the National Institute of Health.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, I started at NIH as a Science and Technology Policy Fellow. And I started at the National Institute of Nursing Research and worked there for, I think, maybe 2/3 of the way through my first year as a fellow, and got really involved with one of the NINR representatives on the NIH Pain Consortium, which is the sort of trans-NIH group focused on pain research, and ended up getting kind of plucked from NINR and by the current NINDS director, Story Landis, and went over there and helped to work in a new office that they were setting up called the Office of Pain Policy.
And you said NINDS. A lot of
NINDS.
people
Yeah, that's the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I'll try to refrain from the governmental ABCD acronym.
That's hard to do.
That we have. It is.
Right.
So yeah, at NINDS, helped to work to set up that office and worked on, my main project was actually on this, developing a national pain strategy. This was something that kind of indirectly resulted from the Affordable Care Act and was tasked by HHS to NIH to pull together. And it was a really interesting experience for me because it was beyond research. So it started to get into issues of coverage and reimbursement and provider education and all of these different areas that I didn't have a lot of insight into. And I really learned a tremendous amount in doing that. I then moved over to the office of the director and served as the special assistant and then ultimately the senior advisor to the principal deputy director of NIH, and kind of had my hand in a lot of different things, which is something that I found that I actually quite like, is having a variety of different topics to work on. And I helped to pull together the first ever NIH-wide strategic plan. I helped set up 2 offices within the Office of the Director, the Sexual and Gender Minorities Research Office and the Tribal Health Research Office, and also served as the interim assistant program director for the Environmental Influences on Child Health Outcomes, or the ECHO program.
Wow.
So that was a fun foray into program for me as well. And then, kind of following up on that position, ended up going over to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and working with Dr. Tony Fauci to lead his policy shop within his Office of the Director. So we were working on policy and planning activities for NIAID. And it's interesting now to sort of, now that I'm a little bit removed from that, to see some of the work that we were doing in that office now be coming to bear. Some of the efforts on pandemic preparedness, my office was really involved and engaged with when I was there. Obviously, that's very relevant to today.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then, I moved back over to the Office of the Director and into my permanent role there that I have now as the Associate Deputy Director of NIH, and served ironically a short stint, for about a year, as the acting director of the National Institute of Nursing Research. So I kind of went full circle in my career from where I started. And then, eventually, obviously, now I'm on detail to the Office of Science and Technology Policy.
Yeah, let's talk about how that happened. All of a sudden, Dr. Collins comes over and says, hey, we need somebody at the White House and need someone to go and do a special duty over there and got to focus on potentially a new program. And how did that evolve? And, was it an easy transition for you?
Yeah, so I had been involved in some of the really early conversations around ARPA-H at NIH at the beginning of the administration, and was kind of asked by by Francis and Larry, Dr. Collins, and Dr. Kubak, if I'd be interested. And, I thought it would be an amazing opportunity. I mean, how often does something come around when you can help contribute to setting up a brand new organization, multi-billion-dollar, hopefully, organization within the federal government. So, I also took my own advice that I often give people, which is say yes to everything, because you never know what doors will open.
Right.
And and then I met with Eric and Dr. Lander, and he offered me the position to come over.
Well, congratulations. I think it's an extremely important role. And you mentioned ARPA-H. So we're going to talk about ARPA-H because a lot of people in the audience probably don't even know what ARPA-H is. And that's another acronym which you're going to have to explain, right? So please introduce us to ARPA-H, what it stands for, and what hopefully its goals will be.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can change that unawareness from this conversation. So ARPA-H stands for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. For folks who are familiar with the DoD environment, this is essentially a DARPA for health. So what we're really trying to do with ARPA-H is to create a new division within NIH that will help to equitably benefit the health of all Americans by catalyzing health breakthroughs. That's really what's at the heart of all of this. And
sounds like a mission statement. Is that a mission statement?
It kind of, that is definitely included in the mission statement.
Okay.
Sure. But it's targeting those things that can't readily be accomplished through the sort of traditional research or commercial activity pathways that exist. We have some gaps transitioning research between fundamental science and industry, and really trying to get over that hump. That's really the space that ARPA-H is trying to fill, and we're hoping to apply an existing model, the one that DARPA uses, to work in biomedical and health research. So what's this DARPA model, I guess, is probably the next question. It's something that embodies being really flexible, urgent, time-bound, risk embracing, sort of taking on high risk, high reward research, and having a focus on the program managers who are running the different programs.
Yeah, and so NIH basically has intramural and extramural research. Intramural with the scientists that work inside of NIH, and the extramural, which goes to the funding to the universities and other researchers outside of NIH. And would ARPA-H be focused primarily on the intramural researchers, or would it be a combination of both?
It actually would be mostly focused on extramural research.
Extramural.
Yeah. So funding academics in industry, funding researchers in academia, funding and partnering with industry and other organizations across the sort of biomedical ecosystem. We've gotten that question a lot. Would we be able to support NIH intramural researchers with this? And I think the answer is that they have a proposal that can help to address the challenge that ARPA-H is trying to address. Then sure.
Yeah, that's going to be innovative. I guess that's why you're creating a new organization, right? Help fill those gaps you talked about. So when was the last time NIH created something new?
Yeah, sure. So, I think in terms of like a new institute or center, the last institute center that was created was NCATS. That was about 10 years ago. And more recently, we've changed the names of some of the institutes, like the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health recently changed its name from NCAM, which stood for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, I believe. This is a knowledge test, a memory test. But it's been a little bit of time since a new large entity within NIH has been created.
And really, who is the pioneer for this? Who's thought, or who creation? Who thought that this is something that was needed and really was the champion for this?
Yeah, this is something that has kind of been floating around for a little while, several years. I think this is just one of those things where the timing now is right. That we have an administration that is very supportive of science. Francis and Eric are both very enthusiastic about this. This is a top priority for the president. So, and that I think coupled with, we've been living in this time for the last year and a half or so where, kind of public health measures and public health and science in general have all been at the forefront of all our brains. And I think that, the timing seems right to try this for all biomedical research. I mean, we were able to, during the pandemic, to basically take some of these elements that we've been talking about with ARPA-H, the sort of sense of urgency, being goal driven, those sorts of things, and apply them to try to create, for example, a vaccine for COVID-19. Right? And we did that with remarkable speed, mostly built on years of research, but this is an opportunity, I think, with ARPA-H to be able to apply that to much more broadly to a variety of different diseases and conditions.
Even though people have conceived of this new entity, ARPA-H, you just don't wave the magic wand and say, hey, let's create this. And the president and Francis Collins basically, okay, let's start it up and it's ready to go. So it does require some approval levels, right? Yep. So what's the current status of where it stands within Congress and congressional approvals, and what are the next steps in order to try to really make this a reality?
Sure. Well, the president and his fiscal year 22 budget request included ARPA-H for $6.5 billion. The House has put out draft appropriations language indicating that ARPA-H would be coming in at around $3 billion. So we haven't seen anything yet from the Senate, but we're really optimistic that this will receive appropriations for FY22. And then we have also been having lots of conversations to work through what the authorization language would be. So what flexibilities, what authorities would it have to be able to operate, especially those ones that are more aligned with DARPA and ARPA-E, other agencies that follow a similar model that are beyond the NIH current authorities.
So fiscal 22 would start basically October 1st of this year, right?
Yeah, if we get a budget.
So. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, but there might be, budgets generally have not been on time in the past. So there probably will be a continuing resolution and other elements related to the budget. But what is your prognostication as to what the earliest would be that we would actually potentially see a funded ARPA-H and ready to begin?
Well, I think we're optimistic that sometime this calendar year, we will get it appropriations. I mean, never like to try to pull out the crystal ball here for these sort of things, but we're hoping that sometime this calendar year that we'll all get the appropriations needed just across the board, but specifically to be able to start the work on ARPA-H. And of course, we will also need the authorizing language as well to really be able to have the full suite of authorities that we need.
And there's also, Tara, we're talking with Dr. Tara Schwetz, who's the Assistant Director for Biomedical Science Initiatives at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP. There's also been discussion as to whether or not, Tara, this should be inside the gates of NIH or could be outside the gates of NIH. And what's the current thinking on location for a new entity, ARPA-H? So
physical location?
Physical location. Yeah.
So I don't think we've really settled on exactly where ARPA-H will be. I think the likelihood that it will be, I'm going to quote, I guess, within the gates, as you mentioned, or on the NIH campus is pretty small. I I don't think that will happen. But whether or not it will be within the DC area or elsewhere hasn't yet been determined. I will tell you that DARPA has indicated that they benefit a lot from the independence of being a few miles down the road from the Pentagon. So, what that means for ARPA-H, I don't know. Maybe that means Rockville instead of Bethesda. Yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, since we're BioHealth Innovation affiliated with the BioHealth Capital Region, which includes the DC and Maryland area, we're very hopeful that it stays there to actually leverage the strong assets we have. And, that's FDA and NIH. And also, if you look at the warp speed funding, it's interesting to note that about 40% of the warp speed funding landed right in Montgomery County, close to those people who had a great deal of experience in the vaccine, therapeutic, and diagnostic development around the pandemic area. So I guess that's one of our hopes, Tara. And to whatever we can do to encourage that. So you mentioned you were at NIAID for a while, and also at OSTP, there's an office for pandemic preparedness. Do you see anything that ARPA-H would be involved in related to the prevention or working on future pandemics that would also work with NIAID and other NIH and FDA organizations?
Yeah, sure. And BARDA at HHS. I
Right.
think there are real opportunities to collaborate. I think a great example of something that, you could predict, an ARPA-H filling a similar role for, hopefully, knock on wood, we don't get a next pandemic, but an ARPA-H role, and that would be something akin to DARPA's role. So with the current pandemic, so DARPA worked about 10 years ago to support mRNA vaccine and therapeutic development. And that obviously has paid dividends as we've now been able to develop 2 different vaccines based on that technology. And that's a platform technology, so that is being considered for other applications as well. So I guess, the question that I see for ARPA-H is really in this space, right, is really what is the next vaccine platform that's beyond mRNA? Maybe that's an ARPA-H program. Was that nanoparticles or some other brand new technology? I don't know, but that's kind of the beauty of all of this, is being able to try to pull all these puzzle pieces together and sort of see where the intersections are going to be down the road, and really try to catalyze that to speed it up and get there earlier.
As we briefly touched on, we're also in the process of forming a global pandemic prevention and biodefense center in this region, which will be located in Montgomery County. And you mentioned Vanderbilt. The leader of this initiative is Dr. James Crow from Vanderbilt, who's one of the leading monoclonal antibody researchers and scientists actually in the world. So that would be another complementary program or initiative that could partner with ARPA-H, hopefully, regardless of where it's located. But, I think, as you mentioned, it really takes the collaboration and leveraging of resources rather than the duplication of resources to try to get like WHO and CEPI and FDA and DARPA and BARDA and all of these organizations working together. And it shows what can happen, especially with what happened with the BARDA funding, to get that new vaccine out as quickly as we did. So I would see that ARPA-H could play a tremendous role as an intermediary potentially, and helping broker some of those relationships that need to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people in the audience and young women that are attending the forum and listen to the podcast. And you've had a very nice career in progressing in this STEM world, the science, technology, engineering, and math world, and have progressed very nicely with your career. Tell us a little advice that you would give to young women out there who are on the fence or are not really sure whether science is right for them. And what advice would you have for those young women who would like to consider science as a career, and especially in the health field?
Or do it. No, I mean, I have a 9-year-old niece that I'm constantly sending lots of science related things. And actually she, you know, it's funny, I think I've kind of brainwashed her maybe a little bit from an early age, because, you know, they do those, you know, back to school signs at the beginning of the year. What do you want to be when you grow up? And for the last 2 years, she's been a scientist. So I take a lot of pride in that. But no, I mean, in terms of advice, you know, I'd say, you know, work hard, of course. Find a mentor, actually find multiple mentors. I think that's been really helpful for me over the course of my career. Different mentors serve different purposes and different periods of time. You know, some, you know, you want because they're just a really smart person and you value their expertise generally, and they can provide you an kind of outside perspective. Other people might have had a similar experience to you and can give you some guidance and advice on how, you know, they navigated it, or in particular how even not to navigate it, which is helpful. And then, you know, I'd also say to find what drives and excites you. So I know a lot of people get into biomedical research because they have a, you know, family connection to a disease or a disorder, or a personal connection in some way. And for me, you know, I did cardiovascular research and then switched to diabetes research for my postdoc. And I will say that type 1 diabetes runs in my family. My mom has it, my aunt had it, my grandfather had it, multiple generations. And you know, so for me, that was something that was a passion of mine because of that connection. And ironically, just a couple of years ago, my dog was diagnosed with diabetes.
Oh,
so I really can't get away from it.
Oh, wow.
but you know, so find that thing that really excites you and drives you, and don't be afraid to try different things, right? That's kind of how we started this conversation, talking about me, you know, kind of taking that leap and coming on detail to OSTP. Sometimes you don't know whether or not something is a right fit for you unless you try it out.
Right. And I like your phrase, just do it. I guess the key is for all the 7-year-olds out there, try to find an anesthesiologist that can educate you about the medical career. But, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, you know, all of the different organizations, whether they be private or public, have different cultures. And you've been in the NIH culture for a long time, and all of a sudden you're thrust into the OSTP White House culture. Can you talk a little bit if there's any, you know, what do you see as the differences between the two cultures and the two different organizations?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting because I'm coming in at a time where it's not typical, right? For lots of reasons. One, I started in April, so it was kind of towards the beginning of the administration. There were not nearly as many people in OSTP as we have today. We've really been staffing up. And also, you know, we're working mostly from home remotely. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard. And I think a lot of people can appreciate this who've had to do this over the last year and a half. It's really hard to change jobs in the middle of a pandemic. It's hard to learn who you should be talking to. It's hard, you know, especially as new people are coming on. You know, getting to know them and meet them and understanding their portfolio and their role in the organization. It just takes a little bit more time and effort. And that's really, I think, been the biggest, I think, challenge for me personally is having to do this remotely and not being able to have the experience of meeting people in person and having kind of those, you know, side conversations that you tend to have to get to know and understand people.
We're all hoping that's going to change soon, because we'd like to have you come and speak at the conference in person next year, because it's a little hard to try to interact with 1,000 people virtually, right? Yeah. And you know, this has been very enlightening. We've learned a lot about ARPA-H, a lot about your background, career, and your progression. But are there some things that you'd like to chat about that we haven't asked you about, that you'd like the audience to know about what's going on within NIH, within OSTP, or in your own personal career that you're pursuing right now?
I mean, the only thing that kind of comes to mind is just is sort of thinking about the science that ARPA-H could support, and really challenging, the audience to start thinking about all the amazing things that we could do to build on all of the fundamental and foundational work of NIH and others to develop this ARPA-H. So this is the sort of like if you could wave a magic wand, I mean, what challenge do you think an ARPA-H could solve, or what big idea do you have that it could really help to support and drive advancement in? That's what I'm excited about, and I hope that people will also get excited about the potential opportunity that we have here.
Well, that's great. I mean, I have one last question since you brought that up, is that do you believe ARPA-H will work traditionally like most of the other institutes and agencies, where they'll have calls for proposals, or you're going to have priority areas where you're going to go out and seek the best science and researchers to work on certain areas that are a focus for ARPA-H?
Yeah, so what we're thinking for ARPA-H is that we will have the program managers come in, and they'll work to develop a program. And then we'll put out a call to solicit applications, very clearly outlining what the goals of the program are. And so people will submit their applications based on that. I think in particular, the first year, or maybe several more, we will probably have kind of what is akin to an investigator-initiated open kind of broad agency announcement to have people send us their great ideas, because we're still in a planning phase with this, and I imagine as we're starting any new organization, it always takes a little bit of time to get fully up and running and operational. So we'll want to be open to any great ideas that might be out there and could come our way.
Great, thank you. I mean, who knows, your next career within NIH might end up being with ARPA-H. You've helped, you're going to help create it, and so it's sort of like being an entrepreneur, really, with a new program like this. The people who get involved with that organization from the beginning are going to be very entrepreneurial, very innovative, and it's like having a clean sheet of paper to work from. It's going to be very exciting.
It is exciting, yeah. As you said, it's a clean slate for a variety of different things, and we get to help put the first words on that paper, and see where things will go with this. And yeah, there is a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit with the whole endeavor. It's funny you mention that. I've actually, two things. I'm taking a class on lab to market transitions right now, just to sort of, make sure I have some additional awareness and knowledge about, how this all works, and just terminology even. And the other thing is, as we've been talking about things with ARPA-H, even some of the more kind of operational, structural, administrative stuff, things have come up, and I've been challenging people. I'm like, well, this is a high risk, high reward organization. And it's all a kind of a, in some ways we can look at it as an experiment. So we should be bold and audacious in everything that we're doing with this organization.
But I agree 100% with you, and as a great philosophy, hopefully the leadership of ARPA-H will carry the same philosophy that you have. So this has been very, very educational for all. And also the lab to market, if you would like to get exposed to some real-time lab to market stuff, BHI works with small, large, big, all kind of companies. If you want to get exposed to anything specifically, we'll be glad to give you exposure. You're way beyond the postdoc stage, but I'll tell you, lab to market is a new world, and that's a great experience, and who knows, that might be your next foray in getting involved in the lab to market area. So we hope to follow your career and stay closely associated with your success and progress, and we hope we can work with you in the future. So thank you very much for participating in the 7th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum. And we've really had a great pleasure in talking with Dr. Tara Schwetz, who's the Assistant Director for Biomedical Science Initiatives at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP. And listen for more from Tara on ARPA-H, because She is going to have a lot of new news for us, hopefully in the next couple months. Thank you, Tara.
Great. Thanks for having me.